Welcome back. Got an interesting story today, a rather gruesome story. Um, you know, Boston, where I grew up right outside of Boston. I'm going to touch on everything from organized crime to street gangs to maybe even other stuff, depending on what you guys like. But today we're going to talk about probably the only national gang we have here in Boston, which is MS13 and 18th Street. So two, I guess. MS13 is definitely, much more known nationally. Everything else in Boston, which we'll touch on too in other individual, cases with gangs and gangsters and stuff like that. Boston is very different than New York and California and other places. We don't have the national gang stuff. Just, what we're going to get into today is the only national gang in Boston. They do what is called banging blocks. So there's every street is a gang. You get what I'm saying? So it's not a national thing, it's more of a neighborhood thing. They call it banging blocks. So that's how the gangs are. This project's against that project, or this block against that block. Gangs mixed together. Different streets will form an alliance, and it's gritty and it's grimy. But today is a brutal story. We're going to touch on one of many conflicts in that, with East Boston in 18th Street versus MS13. So today we're going to get into a case about this. This occurred back in 2015, and the MS13 member, the lead defendant in this case, was sentenced to 36 years in prison for RICO. Conspiracy involving the murder of a 15-year-old boy on Constitution Beach in East Boston back in 2015. So that's what we're going to get into today. It's a really sad. It'll tug at your heart. If it's brutal. Gang violence, organized crime, it touches places. It's not all that, we only kill. People make mistakes and innocent people get killed all the time, and that's what we're going to get into today. So today, we're going to talk about Carlos Malera, also known as Chuchito, also known as Criminal. He is a 21-year-old Salvadorian national. He is the lead defendant on this case. On September 7th, 2015, Gonzalez and Henry Parada and a juvenile member of MS-13 participated in a murder on Constitution Beach in East Boston. The gang targeted a victim in a catfishing scheme, which this was very creative and very, it's scary what people can do when they want to cause harm to you, or, they want to make their bones in the street. So in this, they targeted this 15-year-old boy who they assumed was a member of 18th Street. He wasn't. He ended up not being a member of 18th Street. So what they did was they made a fake Facebook account of a 15-year-old girl, which was made up. There was never no girl. It was a fake Facebook account, and they started contacting this kid. So there was 3 of them out of the 4 indicted, and we'll touch on the major conspiracy that came down. This is just one branch of that giant RICO the FBI in Boston in 2016 had a major takedown in East Boston and surrounding areas of MS-13, mostly MS-13 and 18th Street. And this is just one instance. This is one of the more disturbing cases where they made the fake Facebook account of a 15-year-old girl to target this kid who was 15 years old. The victim, we're not going to use his name. All you need to know is he was a 15-year-old who got tricked and got murdered on an assumption that ended up being wrong, and it was brutal. So, by MS-13 members, they suspected he was a rival, and he wasn't. So this ended up becoming an initiation. One of them was already a full-fledged member of MS-13. The other 3, this was their initiation. So when they lured this kid to Constitution Beach, I believe they spent about a month kind of, finessing and, building this and that, trust. Maybe had a girl call him on a number thinking, people are clever. And so what happened was he was lured to Constitution Beach, which is not a remote area, but it kind of is in East Boston. It's somewhere where something like this could happen. And so he was lured to Constitution Beach. And instead of seeing the girl that he thought he had been talking to for a month and some change or whatnot, he ran into the 4 individuals that we're talking about today, and they murdered this kid so bad that, I mean, I can still remember being at work reading the paper, right? And this was one of many where these random teenagers were popping up dead everywhere, and it garners attention because MS13, let's face it, I mean, Donald Trump, all these people, it's a vicious gang and it's everywhere. And it's still here today, and it's probably not going to go anywhere. East Boston, Chelsea, Revere, Everett, Somerville, Lynn, those were all areas that were targeted in this giant takedown, this huge RICO case back in 2016. So yeah, the victim in this case was stabbed a total of 33 times, okay? And they were bludgeoning him with rocks and all types of stuff. It was so disturbing, okay? So when they finally got to the scene and the coroner and all that, the autopsy revealed that the kid that was murdered, the innocent kid that they, assumed was a rival gang member, was so brutally murdered that there was pieces, the tips of a few, I think there was 3 or 4 different shots that the coroner in the autopsy removed. Pieces of the knives that broke off were embedded in his skull. Yeah, so it is grimy out there. It is gritty. This is a 15-year-old kid killed by people that were pretty much all the same age. You know what I mean? You know how disturbing that is to be able to do that and not even being correct. It wasn't even so. This kid had nothing to do with nothing. He just went to school in that area. And, whether they made it up to be like, okay, we'll just say this or that. You know how people do sometimes. They target people who they think are weak or whatever. I don't know if that's the case with this, but either way, a 15-year-old kid was murdered. Wrong, not that murder is ever okay. It's not, but it's brutal, And we're gonna finish up this video, and I'll explain a little bit more. This is one of many cases that were coming up. They were finding young teenagers from mostly in East Boston, but Revere, Everett, Chelsea. They're finding these kids dead everywhere. I mean, it got so brutal to the point before the feds stepped in and took them down. There was another case where, Boston is a place like many that has a subway system, just like a lot of East Coast major cities and stuff. And the Blue Line services the airport, Logan International Airport, out to East Boston, all the way up to Revere and all that stuff. But it got so heated with MS13 and 18th Street, they were having gun battles on the train and stuff, you know what I mean? Or running into people, the Blue Line services the New England Aquarium, which is a huge thing. This was, if you look into it more, and we'll touch more, This is just kind of, I wanted to mix it up today and show you that I'm not just going to be doing organized crime, stuff like that. I want to touch on gang culture and really criminality as a whole. But this is just one that I wanted to drop today. Gauge you guys' opinions, see if you like this type of stuff, if you want more stories on that, if you want me to touch on more of the, the street gang culture in Boston is wicked. It's kind of like, if you listen to hip-hop or rap, it's really the same thing, you know what I mean? Like, there's really not someone huge individually that has, came on the scene in Boston, whether it's rap, you get what I'm saying? So, there's a lot of stuff that I want to touch on, but, comment, like, subscribe, and let me know what you guys think of this. Let me know if you want me to touch on more of this stuff and whatnot, because East Boston is a very historical place. You gotta understand, before it became Little Central America, which it is now, with MS13 and 18th Street and all that, it used to be a huge Italian enclave. It was, one of the major hubs, the North End, East Boston, later on it became Revere and stuff like that and surrounding areas where, the patriarchal crime family was heavily embedded. And there's a lot of stuff, we're going to touch on that too. I want to touch on a lot of stuff that other people haven't, and I'm going to do stuff on other, New York and whatnot and everything else. But I'm from this area. I grew up right outside of Boston. And, this was a major case. This grabbed national headlines when it came out. And, you know, eventually this was added to the indictment, the major sprawling indictment back in 2016 when the feds moved in. Roughly a year later, they included this murder and a couple of others, and rounded up, I want to say close to like 80 members, 80 to 100 members of MS13 back in one of Donald Trump's first moves. You know, every few years the feds take down a major gang in Boston. And like I said, this is really the only national gang that we have in Boston. There might be other little cities and towns that are, you know, rough, your Brocktons and other places of Massachusetts that may have some type of national gang structure, but as far as Boston is concerned, the street gangs are a local thing. It's a neighborhood thing. They call it banging blocks. So this was just another case of some gritty Boston gang law. This was a kind of more recent one. There's a lot more. Let me know. Let me know what you guys want to do. If you have any ideas or suggestions, please leave it in the comment section. And again, guys, please, you know, if you like this video or some of my other videos, like, comment, share, and yeah, I look forward to the next video. Have a good weekend, guys. Take care.